There's a Milky Way photo that feels almost impossible the first time that you see or hear about it. It's called a double arch Milky Way photo, and you can only capture it on a few nights each year. While the window is short, the idea is simple. You capture the winter Milky Way and the summer Milky Way core on the same night from the same location using the same gear. It's one of the cooler things you can do in night photography because it proves that the sky is not static. It's moving all night long, and the seasons change the part of the galaxy we're facing. Let's break down what a double arch is, and then I'll walk you through exactly how to plan and shoot one. When people say the Milky Way, they usually mean the bright summer version with the galactic core. That's the classic Milky Way shot. But in the winter months, we see a different side of the Milky Way galaxy, what many photographers call the winter Milky Way. It includes Orion and surrounding star fields and nebula-rich areas. A double arch is when you photograph the winter Milky Way arch in the evening sky on the western horizon, then later the summer Milky Way core arch in the pre-dawn eastern sky. You're documenting two different seasonal phases of the Milky Way during one long night. This only works during a short time of year because you need a very specific overlap. The winter Milky Way still has to be visible soon after dark with a nice arch. The summer Milky Way core has to rise before dawn and rise high enough to have a similar arch height as the winter Milky Way. The night has to be long enough to shoot both. And the moon needs to be out of the way, meaning it isn't in the night sky while you are trying to take either arch image. In the northern hemisphere, the best window is usually in March, centered around the new moon. This window is open a few nights before and after the new moon. Generally, it's not longer than 5 or 6 days, but it can vary depending on the year. This also only works in locations below 50 degrees latitude. For those at higher latitudes, the Milky Way core doesn't rise high enough. For the southern hemisphere, double arches are visible, but in September, not March. And for latitudes from 22 degrees south down to Antarctica. Here's the key concept that makes a double arch look intentional instead of awkward. You want both arches to be at a similar elevation in the sky. If one arch is super low on the horizon and the other is high overhead, the finished blend often looks unbalanced. A great target is shooting each arch when it's roughly mid-sky, not hugging the horizon and not straight overhead. That's why timing is everything. A double arch capture is usually 3 sets of images. First, capture the foreground as one solid 360 panorama. This is your base, your landscape, your anchor. In many locations, you only need to shoot the foreground once as a full 360-degree panorama or wide sweep. If you want more detail in the foreground, consider taking the image during blue hour. That's the time after the sun sets when the light in the sky stops looking orange or warm and starts cooling to a blue color. This will give your foreground the right color, but there will still be enough light in the sky to help you bring out details without minutes-long exposures. For blue hour images, you can also keep your ISO lower to reduce noise. The trick with a blue hour panorama this large is to keep the settings constant but work quickly. You want at least 30 to 50% overlap with each image. I find that moving my tripod 15 degrees after each image when my camera is turned vertically gives me consistent success with panoramas. For this foreground image, you could turn your camera horizontally and increase that to 30 degrees since you don't need to capture as much of the sky. For focus, I recommend manual focus and leaving the focus consistent, unless you have some very close objects in your foreground. Then you may want to adjust focus when you reach those objects in your panorama. For most scenes, focus on something in the bottom lower third of your frame. This will give you pretty consistent focus and sharp image throughout. Our next image is to photograph the winter Milky Way. This happens soon after astronomical darkness. You will be aiming towards the western sky where Orion and the winter Milky Way are setting. This part is time sensitive because the arch drops quickly and you want to capture your panorama while the arch is higher. I recommend starting in the southwest part of the sky near Orion and working towards the north in 15-degree increments with your camera turned vertically until you have captured the full arch. Make sure you leave lots of room on each side of the arch for stitching the image together. It's better to have too much sky than too little, especially with this kind of image. Settings for the winter Milky Way are nearly identical to summer Milky Way settings. You may be tempted to increase ISO or shutter speed to bring out more detail. Just remember, you don't want trailing stars because it will look strange when you stitch them all together. Use the 300 or MPF rule to keep stars sharp. If you are comfortable using a tracker, you can attempt a tracked panorama here, but I don't recommend trying this for the first time during this tight window. It's better to get a less detailed image than have a failed attempt. Once you capture your winter Milky Way image, leave your tripod where it is and wait. Our last piece of the puzzle isn't going to be visible for several hours. So if you want to go take a little nap or get warmed up between images, this is a good time to do that. You can leave your tripod in place, but I would generally remove the camera and take it with me. This is also a good time to change batteries and memory cards if necessary. Later in the night, the Milky Way core rises in the southeastern sky and builds into a strong arch before the sky begins to brighten from the coming sun. The Milky Way becomes visible in the early morning hours, but it takes a little time to rise high enough to make a higher arch. Check apps like Stellarium or PhotoPills to get your exact rise times in your location. Once the Milky Way is in position, begin capturing your arch. Start with the southern end near the core and work your way towards the northern end. Settings for this panorama will be the same as a single Milky Way core image for your camera. Remember not to push the shutter speed. You don't want star trailing in different directions throughout your panorama. Once you have captured your Milky Way core panorama, you are done. You can capture other images or go to sleep. If you aren't sure what settings to use to capture the Milky Way, you can check out my free Milky Way settings calculator linked in the description below. It will give you exact settings for your gear. For this particular image, I would recommend using the MPF setting option. The calculator gives you settings for time lapses, but they are the same as a single image. You can just say you want to take a 10-second video and ignore the recommendations about how many images to capture. Let's talk about choosing your location. A double arch is not a pretty spot photo. It's a geometry photo. You need a clean view to the west and a clean view to the east, ideally close to a 360-degree open horizon. You also need dark skies and low light pollution in nearly every direction. Utah deserts can be fantastic for this, but you have to avoid tall canyon walls and tree-covered areas that block the horizon. And here's the big thing. Your foreground has to look good from multiple directions because you'll be pointing your camera one way after dark and a different way before sunrise. Use Google Maps and light pollution maps to locate a suitable place near you. If possible, pick a location you visited before or visit the location before the new moon to check it out with PhotoPills and make sure it will work for both panoramas. Planning is going to be more important with a double arch image than most images. You need to know exactly where you are going, what time you need to start taking the images, and when you need to be back to start capturing the Milky Way core. Let's talk gear. You can take a double arch photo without fancy gear, but there are some things you do need. You need a camera that handles high ISO well, a wide lens, and a solid tripod with a rotating head. I would also add an L bracket, an intervalometer, and a lens heater, but you could get by without those. If you live in a humid climate or the temperatures are near freezing, a lens heater and battery pack to run it will become essential. I also recommend extra batteries and memory cards and a headlamp or flashlight. Remember to dress appropriately for your climate. The nights are cold in March in nearly all climates, so make sure you dress accordingly. Before taking any panorama, make sure your tripod and camera are level. If your tripod is not level, the images will veer up or down as you rotate the tripod head and camera. For panoramas, your lens choice matters more than regular images. A wide lens makes taking a panorama easier to accomplish. A good range is roughly 14 to 24 millimeters for a full sensor camera. For a crop sensor camera, 24 will be cropped in tighter, making a panorama difficult. If you have a wider lens, use it. I recommend shooting panoramas with your camera in the vertical position. We call this portrait orientation. This will allow you to capture more of the sky in each frame. It does mean that your frames are thinner, so you will need more of them to span the full arch. This is why I recommend moving my camera 15 degrees after each image. This gives me plenty of overlap, but means I usually need 14 to 16 images for a complete Milky Way arch panorama. If your tripod doesn't have degree markings to help you measure the rotation, turn on the compass app on your phone. Set it on top of your camera and rotate the tripod head until the compass has moved 15 degrees. Our shooting strategy for this image is to capture more than you think you need. When you shoot panoramas for something like this, don't shoot the minimum. Shoot extra overlap and extra height. Give yourself room to stitch and crop. Remember, you already have the foreground, so it only needs to fill up around the bottom third of your image. This is one of those shots where you don't want to come home and realize you clipped the top of the arch or didn't leave enough margin for blending. The next tip is don't let your panorama take too long. This is the part that surprises people. The sky is moving pretty quickly and your time windows are short. For the evening winter arch, you want to work efficiently because it is dropping fast. For the morning core arch, you want to finish before the sky starts brightening into blue hour. So keep the panorama manageable. Wide lenses, efficient sequence, and don't overcomplicate your first attempt. After capturing your images, you aren't done. The next step is crucial: editing. A double arch is not a one-click edit. In most cases, you are blending a foreground panorama, a winter sky panorama, and a summer sky panorama. This can't be done in Lightroom. You will need Photoshop or another powerful editing software. If you haven't used Photoshop before, this can still be done, but there will be some new skills you will need to acquire to get it finished. A full tutorial video of how I edited this image will be available to members of my Cosmic Circle Mastermind. You can join the Cosmic Circle on my website, or you'll receive the membership as a free bonus when you purchase my Milky Way in Motion course. This course teaches you my repeatable method for capturing Milky Way images and time lapses. You can find the link to the course down below. I recommend capturing a blue hour foreground no matter what. But if you are worried about blending 3 images together, you could continue taking images every 15 degrees after you are past the northern end of the summer Milky Way, and then complete a 360-degree panorama. Then you could stitch together all those images into a panorama, and you would only need to blend in the sky from the winter Milky Way. This can keep your edit a little simpler. If you decide to do this, I would still capture the blue hour foreground as a backup. If you attempt a double arch photo, I want you to be aware that editing is a bigger project than a normal panorama, but the payoff is huge, because the finished image is rare and it tells a story. A double arch Milky Way photo is one of the best examples of night photography as storytelling. If you've ever attempted a double arch, tell me about it in the comments. If you want a simple checklist to help you plan your Milky Way images, you can check out my Milky Way Quick Start Guide, also linked in the description below. Please subscribe for more astrophotography content. Take care and clear skies.